what does being English mean to you? And I specifically chose this. Morris dancing is not... Now, someone's going to ring me and say that it started in Montenegro or something like that. I'm sure I've got it wrong. But I think this is a uniquely English event where mostly men put on white costumes and hats and bells and dance around. So what is it to be English? Well, it probably is to have a rather warm pint on a summer's afternoon, sitting by a village cricket green as you suddenly the Morris dancers. Is that uniquely English? Possibly. But what does it mean to our identity? And do you feel it difficult to display your Englishness? Just lastly, before I bring in my guest, Mr. Jenrick points to the instance, this goes back to 2014, when Labour's Emily Thornberry mocked a tweet of a house adorned with 3 St George's flags above a white van parked in the drive. Mr. Jenrick says, quotes, while the metropolitan establishment have denigrated and mocked expressions of English identity, they seem happier celebrating other cultures instead. To Ian Birrell, who's an award-winning investigative journalist and columnist. He acted as a speechwriter for David Cameron in the run-up to the general election of 2010 and joins me now. OK, well, you can comment, Ian, on this on two sides, both journalistically and politically. What's Mr. Jenrick seeking to achieve here? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I mean, clearly Jenrick is trying very hard to appeal to the right of the party. He's in a dogfight with Kemi Badenoch to try and get into that final 2 people who will go before the Conservative membership. And he's throwing as much red meat as possible, as he has been, as he's slid like a snake across the political spectrum towards the right in recent months and years. And it's a very naked attempt by an opportunistic politician to say, look at me, I'm on the right, I'm the guy who can combat Nigel Farage.
And is that what you think gives the majors in the shires, the Conservative supporters, the jitters the most? It is Reform UK?
Some of them. I think there is a lot of concern about reform. In other parts of the country, there's much more concern about the success of the Lib Dems. In fact, they've just gone up to 72 members of Parliament by basically seizing a lot of the blue heartlands. I think the trouble with what Jenrick is doing is it's just nonsense. I mean, he says that it's an unfashionable thing to be proudly British and English. Well, it's so unfashionable that it's a position shared by Keir Starmer, by James Cleverly, by Boris Johnson, by David Cameron, by Ed Davey, by David Lammy, by Sadiq Khan, by Diane Abbott and by Nigel Farage. And he's saying, let's talk about immigration. Well, we've talked about immigration ceaselessly for the last few years. The issue is what to do about immigration, and that's an area where he, as immigration minister, failed. And, you know, he's now posing as some kind of hero who can solve all these problems that he failed to tackle while he was in office.
Ian, lastly, I'm sure this will be debated up in Birmingham ceaselessly in a week or so's time. Where does the future lie for the Conservative Party? Is it to dial to the right, to chase down Reform UK? Is it to try and seize whatever ground might be left by the Labour Party? Where would you take it?
It's very tricky. I think what you've got to do is it's about restoring faith in conservatism. That I think what they really did was they lost any trust. They looked incompetent. They looked like they were flailing all over the political spectrum. They looked like they didn't stand for anything. They jeopardised the economy. What they've got to do is first and foremost look serious and trustworthy and united. Secondly, I think vote elections tend to be won in the middle ground. And if you don't appeal to the middle ground, you're not going to win the election. And I think it's a siren voice they're hearing from Reform and Nigel Farage. History shows, recent events in Europe show, recent events in Britain show you cannot outfox the populist right by pandering to them, by going towards them, because they'll always outbid you on it. What you've got to do is restore respectability and restore a sense that you are competent, that you can be trusted with the electoral mandate given by the people to run the country in a proper, grown-up way, which is going to help people. Help sort the health service, help sort social care, be strong for Britain internationally, and fix some of the problems that are affecting people, from the cost of living and through to, yes, immigration.
Ian Birrell, thank you. Always enjoy speaking with you. An award-winning investigative journalist, columnist. Has acted as a speechwriter for David Cameron back in 2010, listening Claire Pearsall, who's political commentator, worked as special advisor to Immigration Minister in the Home Office a few years back. First question to you. When we hear from Mr. Jenrick, English identity is under threat because of mass immigration and woke culture, whatever woke is. Do you agree? Morning.
Morning, Nick. No, I don't. And I'm not sure what this obsession with calling everything woke. It seems to be anything that you disagree with these days,
yes,
apparently is woke. But I don't think the English identity is being degraded. I think he's talking absolute nonsense. And I do think people are proud to be English as much as people are proud to be Scottish, Welsh, or Irish. So I'm not sure where he thinks he's coming from. It just seems a very last-ditch attempt to get himself on the front pages.
He would say that it's sometimes the idea of being English is mocked in certain circles, and indeed he would point to the fact that the Labour Party and others would seek to embrace other cultures rather than their own English culture.
Right apart from the fact that people get behind the England football team, the England rugby team, cricket team, you name it in sport, and quite proudly have their flag, especially if you look at the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, all over their literature. So I'm not sure that that is being ashamed of it. And I think that people are actually ashamed of the behaviour of some individuals rather than the country that they're representing.
Mr. Jenrick is leading the leadership race. Were he to be successful, Claire, where would he take the Conservative Party, do you imagine?
That's a really good question, because he lurches from being a centrist MP, which is where he always started from, over to the right, to being a kind of reform light individual. So I think that we would see more of this rhetoric from him, more talk about the ECHR, more talk about immigration. But really, there's going to be no actual change, and I think the party remains divided. So unless he can look to work across the entire party, we're going to end up with more years of the same.